Hey everybody, this is my native tank. You see that one fish that's kind of swimming around a little more active than the others? That is a creek chub, and he should not be in there. I went through here yesterday and spent about a half an hour very aggressively rooting out the creek chubs in this tank. And I mean, they had got to the point where they were hiding. I was lifting up rocks. They were laying down so low it was hard to believe that fish could hide the way they were hiding. It was kind of interesting to see some of their techniques. But they were really stacking themselves underneath the rocks and stuff to hide. And I was able to get them all out, I thought, and I looked and I looked, and I, again, just assumed I was done. I got all of the creek chubs out, but when I turned the lights on this morning, there's that one left. So my work is not yet done. I still have to get that one out of there. I'm leaving the minnows in. The minnows are going to be harmless. They're not piscivores. They're not going to eat the other fish that I'm planning on putting in here. Likewise with these little white suckerfish, you can see a couple of them hiding. We can kind of see a couple of them hiding in the corner back there. The other one is lying up right here. They don't bother small fish either, so me having some little rosy side dace or whatever I put in there that's going to be small, because I would like to see a lot of small schooling fish rather than big chunky fish in here. I want to see lots of little ones. And with creek chubs in here, you just can't do that. The creek chubs are really, really aggressive, and they've got giant mouths, and they will eat anything. So, can't have small fish in the tank with the creek chubs. I can't have crayfish in the tank with creek chubs. Of course, I can't have crayfish in the tank as long as I've got these white suckerfish living on the bottom. I could probably try, but I don't know how well it would work. It would probably wind up in some of these white suckerfish getting chewed up and attacked in the middle of the night. I've also now got the tank open top, and you can see wires coming up right here. The crayfish will climb right out of that. I also plan on having some of the woodwork emergent. The crayfish would climb right up and out of that. The other day when I did my water change on this tank, I actually detached my spray bar and just left the vent open to really move the water a lot more. The spray bar is getting clogged. I need to pull it off of there and take a brush and scrub out all the individual little portholes, and maybe even run like a bottle brush down through each section to get the water flowing through it again properly. That is if I wanted to keep it spraying the way it was spraying, but I actually want to do something a little different. Again, I don't want to talk about the ideas I have for this tank too much because I really do want it to be a surprise, but I've got some pretty good ideas for this tank. And it's not going to involve having that spray bar on there anymore. So this just gives me a little bit of a visual something to go by to see how much different it would look without having that spray bar, with having more of a direct flow into the tank rather than having that sort of spray bar effect. So yesterday I went out to the reservoir. I was really determined. I wasn't even going to fish. I was just going to motor around and look for kind of make out my big pleco on the back wall back there. Of course, the camera's going to focus on the front glass. I went out with the intention of looking for woodwork. I knew where two spots I wanted to try were going to be, but they were about, one was about 2 miles upstream from the boat launch. The other was about 2 miles downstream from the boat launch. And it was a weird day. It was all gray and overcast, and I really didn't feel like going out anyway. It was all sort of heavy and damp, and it just felt like it was going to rain, but there was no wind. It was dead calm, and I figured at the very least the water is going to be like glass, and I can just get out there and go motor around, being kind of a crappy day. Probably not going to be a lot of people out there. And so I get out to the boat launch, and not only was there little white caps on the choppy, windy water, I have no idea how we had wind at the reservoir, but not here. The reservoir is 5 miles from here. So the cars were parked all the way up out to the road, lined up out on the road. I saw about a dozen boats just from the bridges I drove over, and I got there to this. It was like I drove into a different world. So I just did a loop around the road and just rode right back out of the boat launch and came right back home. I never got my boat wet. So maybe today the weather will be a little nicer and I'll be able to get out there and we'll be able to look around a little bit more for some woodwork specifically. But the tank sure looks empty and bare with all those creek chubs and everything out of here now. So the other thing we got to do today is go down to the stream and empty the minnow trap. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that right now so we can attach that right to the back of this video. So sit tight and I will see you guys down at the stream. Alright, so let's see if we got something going on down here today. It's a little chillier out than I thought it was going to be. But fortunately, I've got these new boundary boots, and they're thick neoprene, so I don't even feel this water temperature at all. My sealskin's waterproof socks, as awesome as they are and as much as I love them, they don't insulate you from temperature at all. So once the weather starts getting cold, you still feel like you're walking around in freezing cold water. So while today I probably should have a jacket on, it's not that bad. But if I was walking in this water and I could feel the temperature on my feet, I would definitely be shivering by now. Just can't believe it. Just water seems lower and lower every time I come up here. I guess I could check where the gauge is and see for myself. Got a nice little school fish swimming around out in there. And I had a look at the washout down below the little bridge on the road there, and there was actually quite a few signs of crayfish and fish activity. I don't know if you're getting a glare on the water. I'm assuming you probably are, but you can see a couple spots right there where you can see something is cleaned out and dug out from underneath of a rock, and that usually indicates a little crayfish is living under there. It could be other stuff, but usually it's crayfish that do that. Alright, I got something in there. Let's see what it is. Oh yeah, that's cold water. Got a bunch of stuffs in there. And I'm not seeing any flashes of red. So we actually have a little crayfish, which I think I'm going to bring home just for why not. We'll see what we can do with that. Got an unusually large creek chub. Got another substantial enough creek chub. And I've actually got several creek chubs in here. And once I get all these chubs out of the way, I'll be able to see in there a little more clearly. There's another one. So now out of this pile, I'm looking for any little glints of red or little flashes of sparkle of blue that I see. And I don't see any. All of these just look like those little brown Notropis species, but I'm going to take them home anyway. I got no bait left in the trap, so we'll just go ahead and bring this home with us too. Let's see how well I just tied that on there. So we'll go ahead and bring home one crayfish, and it looks like about 15 or 20 of those little Notropis species. And when I say Notropis species, there are, it's N-O-T-R-O-P-I-S, Notropis. And if you look them up, you'll find that there's about 20 different species that all look almost identical, and they all have one little tiny scale difference here, or number of rays in their fin difference there. Really, really hard to tell them apart. And if you look up a fish called a black nose dace, that is one of the Notropis species, and it looks very, very similar to these, but I don't think these are actually the black nose dace. I think they're something else, and that's why I simply call them a Notropis species. It's one of those species. I just don't know exactly which one. So there you go. Anyway, let me make my way back to the truck, and then I will see you all back at the fish tank. Alright everybody, we are back at the house. Haven't quite made it to the tank yet. I wanted to put them in something that I could see through, and then I also want to add a little bit of tank water at a time and sort of warm the water up. They can take a pretty big shock when it comes to temperature changes. I've done it before. I've shifted them 30 or 40 degrees in a matter of 15 minutes before without any signs of distress other than them seeming a little, lethargic for a few minutes, and then coming back around within an hour or so they were back to normal. These, however, I want to just keep an eye on. So far, I don't see anything obviously concerning. I don't see any lesions. I don't see any worms or anything hanging off their sides. No, any obvious visible signs of injury or parasite or anything like that. But I'm going to give it 15 minutes or so, and we're going to let these guys warm up a little bit while I pay a little more close attention to them. And then if I don't see anything that concerns me, we're going to go ahead and move them right into the tank. I'm not going to worry about quarantining, but we can talk about that in a few minutes. So hang on, and hopefully I'll be seeing you at the tank in a couple minutes. Alright, now by the time I had got the tub of water warmed up, I had added so much in it that I could no longer comfortably handle it with one hand. I was afraid I was going to drop it. So I didn't get any video of me dumping the fish in, but it was basically just me pouring the fish into the tank and them all just swimming down and scattering into the woodwork and the rocks and everything. So I've given them about an hour to settle in and calm down and decide what they're going to do. And I've been kind of peeking in every now and again. And at one point I did see them sort of darting and dashing and swimming willy-nilly. So you could tell they were still kind of figuring out what the hell was going on and where they were and all that kind of stuff. And so I gave them a little longer. And now they've basically resorted to their natural behavior, which is to sit facing upstream in the current. And of course, now that I'm coming over here and, getting close to them and loud, they're sort of getting a little nervous and they're moving back away from it. But they were just basically stacked up in a little school, all facing the same direction, all, pointing straight forward directly into my power head. Not this one here on the top. That's just for surface effect. But I've got a big power head down there that really moves a lot of water across the back of the tank. And for these fish, being stream fish, that's just what they do. They sit in the current, they face upstream. It requires very little energy on their part. It's probably the equivalent to me or you just kind of standing around, not doing much of anything. And they just let the food come to them as it flows downstream in the current. And so my larger fish here, again, everybody's a little discombobulated, especially since I've been in there with the net again this morning. I did get that remaining creek chub out of there, and I also got, or I attempted to get one of the sucker fish out of there, and 3 times I had it in a net, and 3 times somehow or another it managed to get out of the net before I was able to get the net up and out of the tank. So I decided that, good job, you get to stay. And so maybe at some point in the future we'll see about trying to get at least 1, maybe 2 of those sucker fish out of there. As far as the crayfish goes, I've not really seen him since I put him in here. It drifted to the bottom and pretty much quickly just found a place to scurry under some rocks and hide. It's honestly probably not far from where it drifted and landed in the bottom. If we looked around close enough, we might even be able to find it while we're down here. So what I'm hoping is, as I was beginning to say, I don't think I ever finished the thought, is my larger schooling fish here, my minnows that I still have in the tank, and especially when I had a lot of them and there was enough to create a big school, they would all sit here in the front of the tank facing this way, and that was kind of cool. They didn't do a lot, but I actually got to see the fish, sort of like you're looking at these now. So I don't know if these Notropis species like a higher degree of flow, and if that's the case, they might stay back there where they're sitting directly in front of the power head. I suppose it's possible I could reverse the flow of the tank and have the power head on the front corner of the tank and have the flow going around the tank counterclockwise, because right now it's got a sort of clockwise flow. It flows from left to right across the back of the tank, obviously with the power head there, and it swirls around, and of course across the front of the tank here it's flowing from our right to our left. So if I move the power head, I could reverse that direction of that flow, and the higher flow would be across the front of the tank. The reason I do it that way is because that higher flow across the back prevents a lot of the detritus and stuff from collecting in the back, and when I do tank maintenance, I can get to the front and vac if I need to. I can't really get to the back of the tank, or at least I couldn't before I opened the top of it up like this. That's kind of why I'm saying now I can sort of put that power head anywhere I want it. And over time, the tank is going to sort of change a little anyway, so I'm not too concerned about what we're seeing just at the moment. I thought I was going to see a little more swimming around the tank activity. They are hiding a lot more, and I'm really kind of surprised at how quickly they just sort of vanished into this 125. Apparently, I'm going to be able to put a lot of small fish in here and have a similar amount of bioload as I did with all those other big fish. So my only two concerns at this point is the crayfish and my bottom dwellers, you know, my little suckerfish here. But I think that crayfish is too small to be a concern at this point, and it's probably going to take at least 1 or 2 slough cycles of that crayfish before it gets big enough. So we've got time to worry about. I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. The other thing is my tilapia. And I know my tilapia is a voracious plant eater, but it is a cichlid and it is a pretty big fish, so if it's got the opportunity to eat some small minnow-sized fish, it may. I don't know that it will, I don't think that it will, but it very well may. So even though I'm having trouble collecting up any of the rosy-side dace, these will be a good proxy. These will be a good sort of test sample. If the numbers of these start vanishing and over the next week or two I've got less and less and less, and I don't really seem to be finding any dead fish anywhere, we may, you know, come to the conclusion that the tilapia is in there snacking on these smaller fish, and we may have to consider that into the equation if I ever do wind up catching any of these rosy-side dace. Another reason I brought these home today is because, you know, it is getting close to the end of the year, at least for me. Again, when the weather gets cold, I'm done with the outside, and when I say cold, I mean like in the 50s. I don't do the cold weather. I hate it, and I've got a very, very short period of time before I'm in for the year. And so I want to have something in here moving into the winter, and by putting these in here, at least we've got something now. Worst case scenario, if I don't catch any more, you know, if I don't get back out again for the rest of the year, at least we now have something in here to look at to get us all the way through till next spring. So that's about it. I am going to keep working on it. I know I'm going to, you know, I'm kind of going backwards here. I'm putting all the stock in before I rescape it, but, you know, nobody ever, you know, accused me of doing things in the proper way before. I generally like to do things my own way, and they always seem to work out, you know, however they work out. So anyway, make sure you're subscribed. That way you won't miss anything that's coming up with this tank or any of my other ones. I'm probably going to be inside for today, tinkering around here in the fish room. So hopefully we'll get a couple of videos out of whatever I get accomplished today. And if you're subscribed, you won't miss any of them. So thanks again for watching. Don't forget, this is my native tank, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.